recently issued a challenge that basically says, come on, just spend an hour, make a video, put something out. If it's not good, whatever. So now I'm following my own challenge. I've spent an hour. It's not good yet. It will be. If you want to support this project in any way, buy a shirt or something. It's in the description. And I will use that money to pay artists to make legitimately good things. This is not yet a legitimately good thing. Perhaps it will be sometime. Until then, peace. Rick and Morty, Season 5, Episode 1. This one is super crazy because we're used to Rick being some manner of god, something like Dr. Manhattan, because his powers are great. And whenever he's fighting somebody else, it's pretty insignificant, and he just kind of like destroys them very quickly with some manner of superpower. And this episode, you know, he's not fighting any gods. We see him immediately in this very, vulnerable position, which is really crazy. And we see Morty being a hero. If you click through this, he's passed out, unconscious. And here he's just like kind of checking different stuff out, and Morty's doing all kinds of hero stuff. And in the middle of this, he ends up calling Jessica because, you know, he realizes that he's gonna die, and he's on his way back to Earth, and he's like, man, what will I regret if I died? You know, there's this like meditation upon, you know, the end of life and stuff, and what's the meaning of it all, and like what was I always so afraid to do? Now I'm staring death in the face, so I'm not afraid. And then he calls her, and he ends up realizing that he has something like, you know, really great to live for, because he's like a 14-year-old boy, and like having a crush on somebody is like the center of the universe when you're a 14-year-old kid. So he lands in the center of the ocean. Next, out pops homeboy, Mr. Nimbus, who says his name pretty often. And so you had this before the credits even roll and you begin the season. You have this like giant amount of stuff that already happened. Now before Rick even comes to, you see this like exhausted and satisfied look on Morty's face, which makes a lot of sense. And then you look at Rick, and he's still pretty out of it. It looks like he's already healed somehow from what he's got going on. But very soon after this, he's actually scared, which is ridiculous. We've never seen him, we've seen him scared, but not vulnerable. Real soon after this, you see him like setting up for this peace summit with the Lord of the Ocean, and he's like afraid, and it's just strange that a robot isn't doing this for him, or something else. It's a complete departure from his omniscience and also his like not caring, because if you look at him, he seems to really care about this, and he does feel very like out of place with what's going on. And the thing that's so crazy is that like it's just such a giant departure from the world of him being like Dr. Manhattan or One Punch Man or just some sort of a god character. This introduction of vulnerability is pretty crazy. Beth and Jerry are happy. These two are going. Summer is going to go on an adventure to like, you know, do kind of like what the main part of the story should be, even though she does like pretty much 100% of it off camera. Rick's kind of watching it happen on his phone a little bit later, and Morty is not into this whole adventure thing. And then the girl he's been chasing his whole tiny little life is finally interested in him and wants to come over and seems really interested in him, which, you know, can't possibly go well. One thing that is consistent is that when Rick trusts Morty to go and take care of this little wine task for him, where he opens a portal into another another world where time is happening at an extremely, like, much faster rate than it is in their world. He just wants to throw his wine in there to age it, you know. It's a pretty good idea, and it's consistent with all these other like messing with like the entire universe in order to just do some really simple thing, like hooking up a car battery that's powered by a universe that creates another universe, selling a gun to a murderer in order to go play video games. That's some normal Rick stuff. And he also tells him he's very disrespectful to his little buddy during all of this. All right. Another thing that's totally flipped is Jerry stepping up and being like, "What's going on? You're afraid of this guy? That's pretty ridiculous." And he is a pretty improbable nemesis, considering that Rick has fought God, and as Jerry puts it, he made sweet love to a planet. He also he had a girlfriend who was basically like an omni person that could absorb all of the minds of everybody. And that's one of the only other times you see Rick really vulnerable is when Unity leaves him, and then he does that great scene at the very end with some really beautiful sad music. I can't remember what it is, and he takes out this little alien and he's petting the alien, and then he sacrifices that thing in order to smoke its body and pass out for days. And you see the stars overhead. That was a really beautiful, like, sad moment for our God character here. But we learn a little bit more about Nimbus's powers here, because Jerry says he's going to call the police. Nimbus is not too concerned about that, because when they show up, he controls the police, and the way that he controls the police is by telling them to do all of the things that your lower brain tells you to do: fight, mate, and then run away. It's pretty hilarious. So his power to control the police, of course, comes back a little bit later. And then, of course, just like rock stars have this kind of service, this character seems to have like a personal assistant who sets up his liaisons for him, which is pretty hilarious. And there's this whole subplot of them being into that, and it's pretty funny. I hope that continues. So Morty steps through the magic door to age the wine, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I want to pick this up." He grabs it, and then this nice dog character comes through the portal with Morty, comes into Morty's reality to set it down and give him some little life advice about his nervousness with Jessica. And when he goes back, he didn't realize that he was waiting for he had his family waiting for him for many years, and Morty, of course, didn't think about that because he's not a mad scientist. And then moments later, his little boy turns around and tries to kill him, and then from here, an entire society becomes based on this vendetta. And just like Nimbus is doing the thing where he tells them to fight, fornicate, flee. There's this like primal reptile brain thing happening there, and then this is like a primal cultural reptile brain thing happening, where at the base of all of it is hate. And as the society becomes larger and more advanced, you can see that this original hatred of the boy from the magic door becomes the driving force of their society, in the way that a lot of religions will take an enemy and make that enemy be the main reason for developing vigilance and technology and everything. And it's kind of hilarious. And Rick and Morty's better than anybody at making things grand and absurd at the same time. Morty comes back in. He has to give the wine to the enemy, and he wanted to snatch an extra bottle for her, but that doesn't work out well for him. And then she's like, gives him a little bit more motivation. Hey, come back and bring this wine. So he has to go back into the portal. He gets back there. Who's waiting for him, trying to lay down a beat down, and he's gotten pretty huge, and it seems like this whole training that he's been doing is just for the purpose of trying to smite Morty if he ever returns. So he comes back in through the portal after taking a beat down and sees that the old man, the young strong guy is now old, and he tells him, "See, I told you he'd come back." And he is just reinforcing kind of like the generational vendetta. So then slowly but surely a society is born, and all of it just to stop him. Why do we guard the gate? Because one day the dark child shall return. He rolls right back in there, bumps into this guard, finds himself surrounded by all of these defenses and this entire society that's just been waiting for him. Back in to get his gear. So the next, society is this kind of like wizard society that is born in about a minute, and then in the end he says, I was real, I was wrong, God is real, So Rick and Morty is the best thing in the world is building entire societies and then sacrificing them in the name of absurdity. And from the ashes of this one, there will definitely be another more advanced society. And they finally advance to the point where they're able to create some like hologram that's going to trick him. And here he is trapped because he went in there to save Jessica because they got Jessica too. He is captured and Nimbus is rejecting the peace treaty. So, in true return to the literary rules of perfection, you're most of the way through it. It's time for the characters to make their kamikaze moment of commitment and set all of the wrong things right. So the guy who's like kind of the main person who was created to study Morty realizes we've built our entire society on a lie. The idea that I've had in my mind that's been driving me all along didn't actually have substance or meaning. Meanwhile, Nimbus is basically saying the same thing to Rick, saying, you used to be this great concept, and I find you hollow and empty. It's kind of the way that the show, is kind of ripping both of its main characters at the same time, and just this kind of like self-deprecating humor, self-hatred that for whatever reason we all love. Rather than waiting for Rick to come save him, Morty makes it happen himself and ends up saving Jessica. Has crossed the threshold, he is getting him out, but then Grandpa does come to save him. And now he rolls in there, he looks around at the hyper-advanced society, and he's like, wow, this actually is pretty good. Now let me Deus Ex Machina this thing, the God Machine, right? Because Rick kind of is the God Machine, right? So he blasts the big scary bird with his superpowers, expecting it to immediately just die. Ends up blasting him back and ripping out all of his cybernetic powers. And he's got this look on his face where he's like, oh man, I didn't expect that to happen. It's not the Rick we really know. That's not our God. Boxed in on all sides by these scary birds, and then what happens? Who comes to save him? This Nimbus character, and it's really possible that he is his nemesis exactly because he kind of his arrival just completely changes the ethos of this character. And he doesn't even say something like, I can climb out of here myself. He takes the help, and that's very un-Rick. And then you have another story that could be its own story crammed into about 37 seconds where she is, frozen in time and it's madness, and then she's enlightened and then madness again, and she goes through this basically like Enlightenment mythology. When you think about what would the mind of somebody who's frozen in suspended animation for millennia, how long is she waiting? Long periods of time, longer than a human life. So in the end, she basically says, your foolish 14-year-oldness is not my jam anymore, Morty. You ruined it. But at the same time, I think this is kind of like a comment on Twilight, where it's like, if you do live in silence and stillness for 100 years or something, it's probably not possible for you to be interested in people from high school. No offense to people from high school. A much cooler guy with a car rolls up to say hi, and she, normally like a show that's just absurd would be her, kind of sloughing off enlightenment and just getting into the car with this cool guy with the car, but she immediately says, no, I'm good. So perhaps her omniscience will continue. And then the absolute icing on the cake is the fact that you have a unilaterally more powerful entity basically saying, like, oh, don't worry. I mean, I know I was about to reject the peace treaty, but there's no war. This is good. I forgive you for everything. And he's, the better person, the bigger person. He came back from being somewhere else and stuff. It's like Star Wars when Han Solo comes back after saying that he doesn't want to help Luke. This is just this wonderful moment. And then not only is Rick's, awesome self, he's normally able to just improvise and fix everything, but his plan, and his plans are always very good, his plan has greatly failed him, because here Summer is walking in and Rick doesn't even have his phone to hit her up because he lost all of his cybernetics, and he seems to have even forgot that this was going on. So Grandpa Rick takes a beat down, and this is normally where he's rapping with Morty and yelling a bunch of stuff about what's going to happen during the season, and instead he's just catching a beat down, and in the end he's carted off by the police. And every other one of these seasons is Morty with this look of like, oh man, what's going on here, and Rick just yelling a bunch of bombastic stuff into his face, and us all laughing, but I guess they couldn't do that 5 seasons in a row. So the end of this is that this is the most genius show that's ever been created. Naval Ravikant is like a philosopher of getting wealthy and successful and stuff. That's his whole jam. He blasts out tweets about making your life good and getting money. And he said that Rick and Morty is the greatest thing that's ever been created. Not that he's the authority on everything that's awesome, but I got to agree that this is the greatest television show that's ever been made by human beings. And if you want anything to get better, just buy shirts or throw money at this channel, and I would pay artists to make better